Hi everyone, I'm Dagnio and I've been doing cons for Artist Alley vending since around 2015. While I've never actually treated it as a full-time gig, I've done a number of conventions here and there across the country. And I started posting these convention reviews on TikTok where I rate cons across a couple different metrics. But the rubric I set up doesn't, I think, fully encompass all the thoughts I have about some of these conventions. So I wanted to make a video that will give me a chance to fully talk about my opinion on some of these artist alleys. Hopefully, somebody out there will find this one useful or enjoyable as well. So I'm going to be rating these conventions based on my experience and my own sales numbers, my experience with their staff and organization, the venue, the city it's in, etc., etc. All of it is going to be entirely based on my own opinion. Since everyone has different experiences, different priorities for vending at Artist Alley, my experiences are going to be different from yours and everybody else's. So please keep that in mind. Before I get started, I do also want to point out some information about the artwork that I sell. So my art is pretty solidly on the anime side of the spectrum. I do sell both original and fan art, but my main subject topics are actually usually mostly video games. I do have prints and a couple different types of merch, and my sales in terms of revenue would be about 25% prints, 25% keychains, 25% standees, which is something that I personally really enjoy making, and 25% of the revenue coming from kind of the remainder, anything from totes, stickers, etc., etc. Okay, so here's the tier list and a number of conventions below. Some of these cons I've only been to one time. I think there can be a lot of differences in how a convention turns out from year to year, and I really think it takes more than one convention vending experience to really judge a convention fairly, so I'll just mention that. You can assume that if I don't say that I've only been to it once, that I've been to it several times, at least twice. I also want to mention that these are all anime conventions specifically. I learned very early on that I do much worse at Comic Cons or like fantasy sci-fi cons, craft shows, etc. So for this video, I really just want to stick to the anime cons. S tier is going to be conventions that I will always try to go to. I would commit a crime to attend. Actually, no, I won't commit a crime, but I would love to go every single year. I try to go all out. If I could only pick one or two cons to attend each year, it would be from this category. A tier is going to be cons that I would definitely like to go to, and I will try to leave those weekends open for those conventions. B tier is going to be cons that I think would be worth going to under certain conditions, but it's not kind of high up on my list of cons to go to. C tier is going to be cons that I will probably not attend again. Not because they're bad at all, but just because they don't really fit with my current goal in attending Artist Alley at anime cons. So depending on what your goals are, these could be great for you. They're just not ones that I personally will plan to go back to. And then D tier is going to be cons that are just not good, you should blacklist it, etc., etc. I am going to be upfront and tell you I don't have any cons in that category. I generally look over a con, do some research before applying, and I personally just would not apply to conventions that I think are not good. Okay, so one at a time from the left here. The first one is Tekko Showcon. So this is a convention that happens in Pittsburgh every single year. The staff, they're really, really nice. It's quite well organized. This was one of the only cons I've ever been to where the staff used to have like a separate event just for the artists to hang out and get to know each other, which was super nice. The biggest problem I have with Tekko is that the buying interest is really just not there, unfortunately. I do think maybe that the number of artists to attendee ratio is a little bit high, but it does give a lot of people a lot of downtime for the artists to sort of socialize amongst each other. And actually a lot of my Artist Alley mutuals we are all friends from these Tekko Shokan events. It has a soft spot in my heart, but it's not like a must-go convention in my area. If you're on the East Coast and you don't have anything going on, I think, it might be a good one. So the second one on the list here is Anime Destiny. This one, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put it in won't go again category. Anime Destiny is a small convention that is put together by the, I think, University of California, Berkeley Anime Club. I don't want to bash on any college cons. I think they're really great. There's a lot of passion in a lot of them. But this one is actually the only convention in my almost 10-year history that I was solidly in the red for. I think at the time I had a lot of costs. There was just not too much traffic. It's a fun con if you're a student. It's just not something that right now I would put my time towards. Okay, so the next con I have on the list is A-Kon. A-Kon is a anime con in Fort Worth, right outside of Dallas, Texas. This one I've only been to one time. That was pre-COVID. When I went, the staff was super duper nice. Staff actually went around with like water and snacks and would ask the artists if we needed to go to the bathroom, if we needed any help, etc. I don't know if it's like the Southern hospitality. I don't have any experience at any of the other Texas conventions, so I don't know if that's normal, but I just remember feeling very welcome. The year that I went, it was pretty good in terms of the traffic. So I thought it was a pretty decent con. The food was delicious. The barbecue was delicious. I do remember the seller's license being really annoying because they didn't have like a temporary license option. You have to apply for like a business license and then cancel it later. But I kept forgetting to, and I had to pay like late fees a couple times. I would probably put it solidly in the B tier. Okay, next one is Anime NYC. I'm gonna put this in the S tier rank. Anime NYC is not that old, and I think I went to it when it first started, and it is really well organized for being such a young con. The venue that it's in is the Javits Center in New York City, and it is gorgeous. The ceilings are really, really high, and the glass panes really make it feel open. Some conventions, some artist alleys feel a little bit cramped and crusty. Anime NYC does not have that at all, at least the years that I went. New York is definitely expensive, so it is going to be an expensive con to attend. The tables are also kind of expensive, but it is always fun to sort of walk around New York after the convention, kind of enjoy yourself, treat it a little bit like a vacation. In terms of the traffic, I personally always do really well at Anime NYC. I've heard it's kind of a hit or miss depending on your audience based on some things that other artists have said, but personally for me, it's always been great. A big downside is that the network is always spotty. If you are able to, maybe bringing like a hotspot, because the vendor and Wi-Fi is actually really expensive to pay for. I will say that I think after the last time I attended, it seems like they massively expanded the artist alley, so that usually does affect the sales. I just don't know how much exactly for Anime NYC. It's just the years I went, it's been great. The next convention I have on my list is Anime USA, and this one I am going to put in the B tier. So Anime USA is a convention that happens in kind of the DC area, and it is not at all a bad con, I don't think. At least the years that I have vended, it's just very easily overshadowed by the other conventions in the area. So you have Setsucon, MagFest, Otakon. All of these are in the DC area, and all of these are much, much bigger than Anime USA. One of the rules that I try to follow when I pick my conventions is that I try not to go to too many cons in a single area. So usually I try to separate out like maybe 1 or 2 cons on the East Coast, maybe another 2 on the West Coast, another 1 or 2 in the middle, in the Midwest, you know, things like that. I think given the other much more well-known conventions that happen in the greater DC metro area, Anime USA is just not really high-ranking choice when I tried to pick the conventions to go to in that area. Also, the DC area is very expensive too if you're traveling in. You just kind of need to sort out your expenses, make sure that it is worth it for you to attend. The next one is a big one, Anime Expo. So Anime Expo is the largest anime convention in North America. I did have a separate vlog just for Anime Expo for this year, so if you're interested, please go check that out. But yeah, Anime Expo, 100% in my S tier category. It does have its faults, it's just the pros of going to AX is just so massive, I can't put it in any other category. Its sheer size is just uncomparable to anything else in terms of like the anime convention scene. It's got great sales. There are a lot of people who go to Anime Expo for the artist alley, and so there's a lot of buying interest every single year. It's also a great event if you want to attend it as an attendee, just because it brings in really great guests, a lot of really good vendors, and even if you are selling, you just want to take a break, it's a fun one to go to. I will say that it is not for the faint of heart. The working conditions aren't great just because the traffic is massive, and the artist alley is kind of tucked away in what is essentially a fancy parking deck. So the ventilation is not very good. I do also think that for such a big, profitable con that the organization and the staff could be improved. Not all of the staff for sure, but there can be some staff that feel a little bit overbearing. I know a really big discourse I've seen recently is like line management. I mean, I've personally not experienced the aggressive ones, but apparently some folks have had aggressive staff that tell them to try to organize the lines, which is very difficult to do if you are trying to sell things as fast as possible behind the table. So, you know, how do you keep your line in front of the table contained when you can only focus on, you know, what's happening right at your table. They do also have a rule that says only one helper can be there at any given point. So, you know, do you make that single helper go and maintain the line, or would you rather have them help at the table to make the checkout as smooth and fast as possible? I think there's a lot of room for improvement, but it is just such a fun convention to go to that even though I have my gripes about it, I can't put it in any other category than the S tier. Okay, so the next on my list is Anime Detour. Anime Detour is one of those cons I've only vended at once, so please take my opinion with a grain of salt. It is, I think, the largest anime convention in the Minnesota Twin Cities area. I'm going to put this in the B category. The traffic and the sales interest is actually quite decent for a convention of its size, which it's not a very big con. I think that comes from the fact that there's really nothing large in the area nearby. The largest convention close to Anime Detour is going to be Anime Central. And Anime Central is about 7 hours away from the Twin Cities, so it's not close by any means. Overall, it had a pretty small artist alley for the number of attendees, which is usually good for sales. And I don't remember having any kind of issue with management. It's not a big con, but you know, I'll go if my schedule and my costs work out. The next convention on this list is Otakon. To be honest, I think Otakon actually falls kind of in this in-between between the S tier and the A tier. But I am going to put it, I think, in the A tier. Otakon is probably one of the most well-organized artist alleys that I have ever seen. Otakon has 3 different levels of artist alley tables that you can purchase. So the standard tables are kind of your usual artist alley tables. I think it just has a 50-50 fan art to original art ratio. You have a bigger kind of 10 by 10 booth for small press. And then you have the unlimited booth at like $1,000+ for like a 10 by 10, no limit on fan art sort of type booth. I know the prices for the booth type tables for Artist Alley, because of how high it is, I know I've seen some complaints about it. However, I think the tier system is a really good way to fund the Artist Alley and the convention without drastically increasing the price of the standard tables, which I think make it a lot easier for maybe newer artists to try out for a con as large as Otakon. So for reference, if you go to Anime.NYC, you're looking at, I think, $400 to $500 for a booth. If you're going to Anime Expo, you're probably looking at closer to $600 for a booth. And these are not easily accessible for some of the newer artists. And if I recall correctly, Otakon is several $100s cheaper than that. The convention is always very, very busy. There's a lot of people that come in, and I don't know why this is, but it does feel like Otakon gets a lot of very, very dedicated fans. So the 2 gripes I have with Otakon are the long hours and the venue. So the hours I think are getting maybe a little bit better, but Otakon has like notoriously long hours, and I think it goes until 9 or 10 p.m. at night. It is very, very difficult to do this con if you don't have a helper, because you're just behind that booth for a very, very long time. The other issue I have is the venue, and this isn't really a problem with the Otakon staff, but Otakon seems to happen during the rainy season of this area. Otakon has leaked in the Artist Alley like 2 or 3 times since the move to its current newer location in DC. It just seems a little bit odd to me that you have this convention center, you know that you have these summer rainstorms, and it still keeps leaking. Like there's something going on with the venue. So I don't know. It would just be great if it stopped raining in the Artist Alley. Otherwise, it's a really, really good con, so I put it in the A tier. Okay, so the next one on the list is Anime Boston. Anime Boston, I am going to put next to Otakon in the A tier. I think that Anime Boston has a really good artist alley size to attendee ratio. It's not quite as big as some of the other cons like Otakon, but the artist alley is small enough that it really does make up for it, in my opinion. It just overall has good vibes. The staff are really, really nice and friendly. The area is very, very nice as well. It's kind of enclosed in this weird like combination of convention hall, the mall, and like a couple hotels and things like that. I actually also have a full vlog for my Anime Boston 2024 experience, so please check that out. It's just overall a really solid con with really not a lot of negatives, in my opinion. I think the only thing that I don't like is that the Massachusetts tax system is very, very annoying, and I think it is similar to Texas in that you don't really have like a temporary license. You have to have like a proper account with the Massachusetts like tax system, and it's just kind of annoying. Otherwise, it's a great con. So the next one I have is Fanime, and I am also going to put this in the A tier. So Fanime is another convention where the sales are really quite good for the actual attendee size of this convention. It's not a small con by any means, but it still has very, very good traffic, I think, for what it is. I'm not sure if it's because it's like the San Francisco Bay Area, but yeah, the sales are always really good. I think the only problem I have with it every single year is that, like, please, for the love of God, let the artists know earlier if we get Fanime or not. So we apply back in, I don't know, was it like January, February-ish? The convention itself is in May. And I think one year I went, we didn't find out until like late March, maybe even early April. And because of it, a lot of artists will drop out. So Fanime is one of those conventions where if you are on the wait list, especially if you're local, please stay on the wait list because there's a lot of artists that will drop just because Fanime has a tendency to be quite late notifying their artists on whether we got in or not. Okay, next one on the list, Anime Central. So Anime Central, I am also going to add in this A tier. I have a really soft spot for Anime Central. This one is in Chicago. It is really the only convention of its size in the Midwest. There's nothing else, I think, in the area that is as large as A-Cen, and so it has a lot of traffic and it also has a lot of buying power. I also really, really appreciate the fact that Anime Central's Artist Alley tables have not gone up drastically in price over the last however many years. Like, I think it's still less than $200, which compared to a lot of the other cons is actually extremely affordable and very friendly to artists. And it's an 8-foot table. Of course, it is really hard to get into because it's lottery based, but if you do get it, it is very affordable. I do also want to note that the sales trends in the Midwest seem to be different than either of the two coasts. And so depending on what your wares are, what your target audience is, it might be a bit of a hit or miss for some people. For me personally, it's always been a really good con, so I love going to it, but just something to keep in mind if you're considering this con. Okay, next convention is Kumoricon. Kumoricon, I've actually only vended at once, but I've personally attended, I think, 2 other times just as a regular attendee. This is a convention in Portland. I'm going to put this one in the B tier. I will apply for it every year, but that is because this is a local con to me. Whether or not you want to travel, I think will depend on your costs. The Kumoricon is really well organized and the staff is really dedicated and very friendly. They do also have a strong preference towards local artists, which I personally think is a very good move for some of these sort of mid-sized conventions. Overall, a pretty solid con. I would just be careful what your travel costs are if you do want to come and travel in. I've moved this logo to the end here because this is actually Otakon again, and I didn't realize I had this in here twice, so please ignore this one. But the next one on the list we have here is Setsucon. And Setsucon is a little college anime convention put together by the Penn State Anime Club. It is a really cute, very small, very homey con, and I am saddened to have to put this in the C tier. This is actually my very, very first convention, and I have nothing but gratitude for this convention and its staff. It is just such a small convention. Unless you are at school in the area, it's just really not worth going to. At one point, it was relatively decent size, but there was an unfortunate case of some bad actors that ruined it for everybody else by getting the entire convention kicked out of the convention center next to the university. So now it is, I think, the next town over, which It's still like 2.5 hours away from the nearest city, which happens to be Pittsburgh. So there's just not a lot of people coming in. There's not a lot of traffic. But, you know, if you are a student and you are looking for a really small, homey convention where you can talk to the fans, talk to other artists at length, you know, this one's for you. It's just right now that is not really my goal anymore. So unfortunately I won't be going back, but I do like this con very much. So, and then the last one on the list, because this one should not be there, is Kawaiikon. So Kawaiikon is Hawaii's, I think, maybe only anime convention. It's certainly the largest one in Honolulu. I'm going to put this one, I think, in the B tier. Again, it's not at all a bad convention, but it is definitely costly because it's Hawaii. There is a lot of buying interest, but the artist alley is so big. It's massive for the number of attendees it is. There is buying interest, but it's sort of diluted throughout the hall, in my opinion. But it is Hawaii, so it is just a lot of fun to go. It's great weather. The people are super duper nice. It's just overall a fun convention to go to. Again, sorry, one more thing to note. I've only been to Kawaiikon once, so this is one of those conventions I've only vended at once. But the one time I was there, it was just, everybody was so friendly and I had so much fun. It is expensive to attend, especially because right around Kawaiikon time is when there's a lot of spring break happening, and so there's a lot of tourists in the area that are not there for Kawaiikon. But overall, if you can justify the costs of going there, it's a great con. It's a fun one. And that is the final tier list. Again, this is all based on my own opinion and my own experiences, and these cons change from year to year as well, so please take everything that I say with a grain of salt. Ultimately, which cons are worth going is going to depend on what your target demographic is and what your priorities are in attending these artist alleys. So I just hope this was useful for someone and maybe a little bit entertaining. Bye! Just want to stick to the anime cons. Bless you! So again, please take yeah. For the unlimited booth sometimes gets sometimes art